All right. So for your exam on Friday, okay, you're taking this time to look at this video and I hope jot down a few things that we're going to put on this board. And there really should be no surprises on here because every day we had talked about a lot of these concepts that make the arthropods so successful. And you would agree, we go around the room, we point at random people and say, okay, what about this trait or this concept or this key to their success? Okay, that's what I mean. There really should be no surprises. So when we talk about that, we could just say, what did we discuss? And it's not so much today. It could be anything from the prior 3.5 to 4 weeks that we've covered this topic. Okay, what did we discuss in class that could say is a key to the arthropods? Oh, I think that apostrophe goes on the other side because it's plural. Arthropods, it's supposed to be a U, okay? Okay, so then, so what did we discuss? And we'd want you to be able to describe those, okay? So remember, write these out in sentence form because this is an upper level class. So how it is you might want to approach this in different types of manners or whichever. But what I'm getting at is maybe you would want to start with, because this just doesn't say, but how many traits did we talk about in class? And if I can do this backwards, it would be that number. Let's try that again. Okay, so then now we take this and reverse it, it would be that. I think hopefully that resembles going backwards. All right. So then maybe that's what you'd want to write down first and then be able to describe those or differentiate them that we had talked about in class. And we can go ahead and put them in order. The first one, we said something about an exoskeleton. Okay, then the next one was jointed appendages. Okay, I feel lazy to, well, I'll write it out. Okay, then because I remember what they all are, I'm just trying to remember what the actual order is. And we could say air was piped directly to their cells, but maybe a better way of looking at that is this type of passive respiration. Okay, then I think it was complex behavior patterns. And let's see here. So there's 4. I also would have said complex sensory organs. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I think the last one reduced competition. Okay, so we're not going to write everything down with all of these because by now we should have hopefully spent enough time with this. And then also keep in mind that what we're talking about here is also in your handout that we have been discussing as well. So if we expand upon this, we might say, okay, the significance of an exoskeleton. Well, with any type of skeleton, that would be, okay, this provides protection But then other aspects that this will do as well is holds in precious water, because some of these arthropods live in such dry environments, you have to have a way to do that, and that's something that the exoskeleton does. This would be a primary function, so then here is a secondary function, and then not that this would be a tertiary one, the next one, it would also be a secondary function that with any type of skeleton, this also would provide sites for. I want you to think about that for a moment. Okay. What would you guess that we are getting at when we say provides sites for? And perhaps by now you've thought about that. Well, here's a clue. While I do my weightlifting, that that's tough weightlifting. Let's see that again. As you might have guessed, like we said, with any type of skeleton, provides sites for muscle attachments. That's what we mean by that weightlifting, lifting that heavy coffee cup to get my sometimes much needed caffeine. Okay, so that's how we could wrap up the exoskeleton. Jointed appendages, okay? One of the things that we would think about and talked about in class, the idea of if you had an appendage like this, trying to scratch your head, scratch your shoulder, or whichever, you do have a site here, which many arthropods do. Their appendages will attach to a central structure, but the moment that you do this, trying to scratch your head, it's really not going to work out very well. But should Mother Nature or the man upstairs have a plan for this and change that and put a joint in there, and maybe multiple joints, now I hope too much time hadn't passed where we lost sound on this, but this is where we left off, which I think might need a little more explaining, and that is we were talking about all the different types of animals, your poriferans / sponges, your cnidarians, which is the jellyfish and medusa, and of course the anthozoans, or the sea anemones, don't move. But the mollusks, which is your most complex, were your cephalopods, your squids, and your octopods, would use jet propulsion and just move in one direction or the other. And of course, I suppose at some point they need to be able to orient themselves going up and down. But as far as having these, okay, to have this complex movements on land, you have to have these joints. And I think hopefully maybe that stood out, the idea that if you don't have a joint up here, you can't do something like this. Okay, then when we say passive respiration, it's the idea that they don't have, some of them do have lungs, but it's still a passive way that oxygen gets absorbed. But for the most part, we said that air is piped directly to their cells. Now, that would be the case whether they have these tracheal tubes with the external openings called spiracles, or having book lungs, okay, which a lot of spiders do. The idea of a book lung is it's just type of structure underneath their abdomen, or thorax, sorry, that looks like pages in a book. Every time you do this, there's a lot of surface area there for them to absorb oxygen. But it's not a type of lung that has to be expanded like it does in mammals, okay? So that air is piped directly to their cells, whether they have tracheal tubes or whether they have those book lungs like we just had discussed. Complex behavior patterns, okay? When we're talking about that, okay, it's not that we would say that, of course, birds, mammals, maybe not so much the fish, but amphibians and reptiles, those also have complex behavior patterns, but it's just this is the first time that would have been discussed, okay? So that's what we mean. These complex behavior patterns is the first time in the animal kingdom this has occurred. I think there's two R's there as well, okay? Complex sensory organs. So what we mean by that is usually when we think of arthropods, it would be that of arachnids that we're thinking about. And in this case, of course, the tarantulas, it's not that they can see very well, okay, but they have lots of hair on their body that would certainly give them information about the outside world. So they have complex sensory organs. So also the insects have those little tiny antennae, okay? That's what happened in what you had seen earlier. We spent some time talking about that with ants, where that leaf dropped in between where the ants were marching, and then the ant goes, I'm blind, I don't know where I'm going, because the pheromone trail that ants leave behind, he couldn't see, but the antennae on there, which would certainly be a complex sensory organ, is something that you can pick up that trail with. So complex sensory organs occurs in arachnids like spiders, or insects, or I should say, or the antennae. It's not antenna like in a vehicle, but antennae in even crustaceans, and insects. And then also this reduced competition we had talked about in class as well, and that was the reason that there's reduced competition is, I should say, as arthropods get bigger, their food source changes. Okay, and we had talked about that in class as well, just the idea of, okay, when you were infants, you were fed baby formula or baby food. Then as you got older, as a toddler, you probably were fed by your parents, and you wouldn't have that same type of food source. You're going from, again, baby formula or milk to baby food, then taking on solid food. So what that means is as these arthropods get bigger, their food source is going to change. So every time that happens, the amount of competition then will decrease. Okay, I'm going to hit pause for just a moment. So another aspect that we'd want you to know is, how are the arachnids different from each other? Okay, well, first of all, you have to know who the arachnids are. Okay, so then when we talk about that, we would say we have the order Arachnae, which of course is the spiders. You have the order Scorpionida. No surprise, scorpions. And then the order Icari, which is your ticks. And you could say mites as well. Okay, and one of the things that we would say about spiders, and that is at the end of that video we've seen about tarantulas, what is it about spiders? Maybe you don't want to kill all spiders, because they certainly do take care of many different types of harmful insects, okay, that maybe